if I look at the sport today, it is still 87% white in Formula One at least. So, it's such a small number of non-white people who had the opportunity to work in that sport. So I grew up out in India, in a country where there isn't a huge history of motorsport. In fact, as I sit here at the end of 2024, out of 1.3 billion people on the planet, there have been only two of us who have come out of India and made it to Formula One. So it's a pretty exclusive club. And I guess in that sense, that gives you an idea of just the scale of the challenge. The fact that only two of us have emerged from the country. There were so many barriers in terms of just having to educate people on sponsors and the media out there on why we were going on this journey, why it was important, what was special about it, why we were trying to be something other than a cricket player. So there were so many layers upon that challenge, and I think really coming from there, that was probably the biggest challenge to overcome. And within that, there's several layers to it. I think that diversity in general is a topic, of course, that's used very broadly, but I think it's quite important from a motorsport perspective to break it down into various different categories. I'm not a huge fan of just using the word diversity because I think it's so generic. Really, for me, in motorsport, there's two main things. I think we have a severe lack of gender diversity, and that's across the board, whether it's in terms of on the track for the people driving, but also off the track and all the people who work in the sport. And similarly, in terms of racial diversity, I think we, if I look at the sport today, it is still 87% white in Formula One at least. So, it's such a small number of non-white people who had the opportunity to work in that sport. So, to me, those are the two real key areas. But the underpinning of that is there's a socioeconomic issue as well. There's really, it is a capital intensive sport. It is seen as an elite sport. And therefore, there's another layer where I think we lack socioeconomic diversity. And there's a whole lot of topics around that to discuss. Racing is a very dynamic sport. No two races are ever the same. No two race tracks are the same. The competitors are all different because you've got a human element of the driver alongside a machine with a car. And I think you have to be able to think quickly on your feet and adapt. Things like the wind changing direction has a huge bearing on how the car feels out on track. Things like the temperature changing 4 or 5 degrees, you get a bit of cloud cover, and all of a sudden you have to adjust the way you drive. You have to adjust the way you get the tires prepared in terms of the pressures and the temperatures. There's so many factors that go into it. All it takes is a small element. We race in the Middle East, for example, and the wind picks up, you get a bit of dust on the track, and you have to change your approach and change your mentality in the way you go about it. So I think there's so many ways in which you have to have flexibility, but you almost have to have that ability to also pre-plan and build in the flexible thinking to your mindset. A race team is a very complex structure. You've got the public facing personalities such as the drivers and the team principals, occasionally a high profile technical person such as an Adrian Newey, for example, who was at Red Bull. But really, none of those people can achieve any form of success if the 1,000 others within the team are not functioning as a cohesive unit. And I think that's where there's a lot of lessons to be passed on, because the pressure to deliver in a Formula One environment exceeds any other sport, any other business, frankly, an industry. Because just think of the timelines. In the road car industry, for example, if a manufacturer decides to build a new car, there's typically a 4-year period. By the time they come up with studying the market, understanding what they want to build, where there's a position in the market for that vehicle, doing their surveys, then they're going to design, then they're going to prototyping, then they do testing, manufacture, and eventually into full production, and then sales and marketing, etc. It's a 4-year cycle. In F1, they've got to build a new car every year. And not just are they building a new car every year, but they're updating that car nearly every race or every 3 or 4 races. So, pretty much every couple of months, you're having to reevaluate your product and come up with better solutions to make it faster, more reliable, more user friendly. And I think just the pressures of time sensitivity in Formula One put a different way in the way people have to think about life and go about their work. And the other thing is there's nowhere to hide. Now, in any other business, there's opportunities with the way you present your financial results, with these opportunities with the way you present your sales figures or things like that, where there is perhaps some wiggle room in terms of getting to the absolute truth. In the racing world, there is no hiding. The results are printed in black and white for everybody to see on a timesheet, and the stopwatch never lies.